At 10:17 p.m. Central Time, the town of North Haven went silent. The hum that had pressed against walls and bone for weeks stopped without fading. A white light rose through the sky, not lightning, not a flare, but something that seemed to ignite the air from within. For a brief moment, the entire town existed inside that brightness. Then it vanished. No sound, no structure overhead, only absence. 3,000 miles northwest, just outside Anchorage, Alaska, I was standing beneath the eastern ridge of the Chugach Mountains. My instruments were running routine atmospheric readings for a regional survey. The air was stable, wind descending cleanly from the slopes, temperature steady below freezing. Nothing in the data suggested instability. Nothing warned me that the sky was about to shift. I noticed the change as a subtle lift in brightness along the southern horizon. It lasted less than 2 seconds, as if the upper atmosphere had been illuminated behind a thin veil. I turned toward the mountains, expecting auroral movement. There was none. Instead, I saw 4 lights suspended above the ridgeline, fixed, evenly spaced. Within seconds, a 4th completed a shallow arc. They did not blink. They did not drift. Their intensity remained constant against the cold blue sky. Whatever held them was not fully visible. Only the lower lights could be seen, suggesting something far larger concealed in darkness. The formation remained for 7 minutes. My instruments recorded no pressure spike, no electromagnetic surge, no atmospheric distortion. Then the lights extinguished simultaneously, without motion. Days later, I learned that at the exact second I logged those lights, a town in Minnesota had fallen silent. That was the beginning of what is now being called the Anchorage incident. My name is Elijah Hale, and I document atmospheric anomalies for a living. I have spent years studying pressure systems, ionospheric behavior, winter light refraction, and the subtle distortions that cold air can produce above mountain ridges. I am not easily impressed by lights in the sky. I have watched auroras ripple like living curtains and seen satellites glide in perfect mechanical silence. What I witnessed that night outside Anchorage did not behave like any of them. The official reports did not connect Minnesota and Alaska. They were logged separately. One as an unexplained acoustic event that ended in a flash of light, the other as a localized optical anomaly near the Chugach Range. No agency issued a joint statement. No advisory was released. But timestamps do not lie. At the exact second one town fell silent, something appeared above our mountains. I did not speak publicly at first. I reviewed the data repeatedly, recalibrated my instruments, and reconstructed the angle of observation. I ruled out aircraft corridors, orbital paths, and known atmospheric interference. Each explanation collapsed under its own inconsistencies. The lights had structure, they had intent in their positioning, and they were not random. This account is not speculation. It is a record of what I saw, what I measured, and what followed in the nights after. The sky above Anchorage did not erupt in spectacle. It revealed something partial, controlled, and deliberate. The absence of noise was as significant as the presence of light. If you are listening from outside Alaska, tell me where you are watching from. Leave your country or city in the comments, and follow this channel as this investigation continues. Because what ended in North Haven did not disappear, it shifted. And I was there when it surfaced again. Chapter 1. The First Measurement. I returned to the ridge the following night before sunset. The snow had hardened into a reflective crust, and the temperature had dropped another 4 degrees. I recalibrated every sensor manually. Barometric pressure, ionization variance, electromagnetic fluctuation. If what I saw had been a distortion, I intended to catch it forming. The sky remained clear past 22:30. No auroral forecast. No cloud cover. Anchorage's distant glow barely touched the horizon from my position. The mountain stood as a dark wall to the east. I kept my eyes fixed on the exact sector where the lights had appeared. I was not waiting for spectacle, I was waiting for confirmation. At 22:41, the air shifted in a way I cannot attribute to wind. It was not movement, it was density. The cold felt heavier against my lungs. The instruments did not spike, but the pressure reading began a gradual deviation. Subtle, measurable, outside normal variance for that hour. Then the horizon brightened again, not a flash, a controlled lift in luminosity. This time I did not hesitate. I recorded the angle immediately, 27 degrees above the ridge crest. Within seconds, the lights manifested. 4 points, identical spacing, fixed alignment. The fourth light appeared exactly 6 seconds later, completing the arc. I counted aloud without realizing it. My breath condensed in steady rhythm as I tracked their intensity through the camera lens. No flicker, no oscillation. The geometry remained constant as though anchored to coordinates invisible to me. I widened the frame to capture more sky, searching for structure above them. There was nothing discernible, no silhouette, no reflective edge. Yet the curvature implied something beyond my field of view. The spacing was too deliberate to belong to independent sources. My electromagnetic reader began to register fluctuation, not interference, not static. A low repeating pattern cycling at intervals of precisely 3.2 seconds. It did not emit sound. It translated as variation in field strength, faint but organized. I felt it before I trusted the numbers. The air carried a pressure that did not match altitude or temperature. It pressed inward rather than outward. The lights held steady above the mountain as if suspended from an unseen surface. 7 minutes passed, exactly as before the formation extinguished without movement. There was no fade. They were present, then absent. The field fluctuation stopped at the same second the final photon vanished from the lens. I stood alone in the dark ridge silence, reviewing the timestamps on my recorder. 2 consecutive nights, 2 identical manifestations. Same altitude, same geometry, same duration, and the pattern cycling beneath it. Whatever ended in Minnesota had not dissipated. It had repositioned. Chapter 2. The shift in perspective. On the third night, I adjusted my position. Instead of setting the instruments along the ridge, I relocated them 20 meters downslope, partially shielded by a stand of frozen spruce. I wanted to eliminate skyline exposure as a variable. I told myself it was about better control of wind interference. It was not. The sky remained unchanged until 22:38. No atmospheric instability. No auroral forecast deviation. I monitored the horizon through a fixed lens and kept my peripheral vision relaxed, the way I was trained to detect motion without fixation. I have spent years observing the sky. That night I felt observed back. The sensation did not arrive as fear. It arrived as correction, as if the environment had recalibrated around my presence. My pressure sensors recorded minor deviation again, but this time the shift began 3 minutes before the lights appeared. It did not match wind pattern or thermal drift. When the luminosity rose over the ridge, I was ready. The arc formed precisely as before. 3 lights, then a fourth completing the curve. Same altitude, same spacing. My instruments confirmed the 3.2-second electromagnetic cycling pattern. It was not random fluctuation. It was repetition. I moved slightly to the left to test parallax. The formation did not change orientation relative to my position. The lights held geometry independent of my shift. That suggested extreme distance or deliberate stabilization. I did not like either conclusion. I I stepped backward once more, deeper into the shadow of the trees. At that exact second, the electromagnetic cycling paused. It did not spike. It stopped for a single interval. Then it resumed. My recorder marked the interruption with a clean gap in the waveform. I froze. I had not announced movement. I had not altered any emission source. Yet the field variation corresponded precisely with my repositioning. I repeated the step forward. The pattern did not pause this time. It continued uninterrupted, steady and indifferent. 7 minutes passed again. The lights extinguished simultaneously. I remained in the dark longer than before, listening to the wind through the branches, reviewing the waveform in my handheld display. There was no visible presence beyond the arc of light. No structure descending, no motion across the sky. Back at my workstation, I overlaid my movement timestamps with the electromagnetic anomaly. The interruption aligned within a margin of less than half a second. Correlation does not imply causation. I repeated that sentence aloud more than once, yet the pattern had reacted once, only once, as if something had registered my shift in position. I have always stood in the role of observer, measuring, recording, interpreting. That night, for the first time, the symmetry broke. The sky did not simply display itself. It adjusted. Chapter 3. The Line Between Us. I did not return to the ridge the next night. I waited. I told myself I was allowing pattern confirmation. The truth is that I needed distance. For the first time since this began, I hesitated before stepping back into that open line of sky. The fourth night was colder. The wind did not descend from the mountains. It moved laterally across the valley, low and thin. The silence felt heavier than before, not because of sound, but because of expectation. I reached the observation point earlier than usual and kept my headlights off. The lights appeared without warning this time. No subtle brightening, no lift in the air. They were simply there, already formed above the ridge when I raised my eyes. 4 points. Perfect arc. Waiting. My first instinct was to check the time. 22:40, consistent. I did not move. I did not reach for equipment immediately. I watched them directly, letting my eyes adjust fully to the cold darkness around them. The space between each light felt measured, intentional. Something shifted at the edge of the tree line behind me. Not sound. Absence of sound. The wind stilled in a narrow corridor as if blocked by something that did not belong to the forest. I turned slowly. The trees were motionless. Too motionless. When I faced the ridge again, the arc had tilted, slightly. Not drifting across the sky, but rotating along its own curve. The lower edge of the formation seemed closer than before, though no descent was visible. I felt it in my chest, before I understood it with my eyes. A pressure gathered behind my ears. Not pain. Compression. The same kind of inward force you feel when descending too quickly from altitude. I swallowed to clear it. The lights intensified, not brighter, but sharper, as if their edges had hardened. The air behind me shifted again. This time it carried weight. I did not turn immediately. I kept my eyes on the arc above the mountains. The sensation was unmistakable now. I was no longer alone at the ridge. I turned. There was nothing standing in the open. No figure in the snow. No silhouette against the trees. Yet the darkness between the trunks felt layered, thicker than it should have been. For a fraction of a second, I saw distortion in the air, like heat bending a distant horizon, except the temperature was far below freezing. When I looked back toward the mountains, the formation was gone, not fading. Gone. The valley returned to ordinary winter stillness, but something had remained. I could feel it in the way the silence pressed inward. The sky had not merely shown itself that night. It had repositioned, and whatever stood at the tree line had closed the distance between us. Chapter 4: Alignment. I stopped pretending this was atmospheric. On the fifth night, I drove past the usual ridge access and followed the service road that climbed closer to the base of the mountain. The snow was deeper there, untouched except for animal tracks and wind scars. I wanted proximity. If something was suspended above the ridge, I needed to stand beneath it. I parked with the engine off and lights dead. The valley fell into immediate darkness. The cold pressed against the windshield as if testing the glass. For a moment, nothing moved, not even the branches. It felt less like quiet and more like containment. The lights did not wait for their usual time. They formed early, already present when I stepped out of the vehicle. 4 points in a clean arc above the slope, closer than before. Not descending, simply nearer, as if distance had thinned. I walked forward, boots sinking into layered ice. With each step, the arc adjusted, not sliding across the sky, not drifting. It held its shape but repositioned subtly, preserving its angle relative to me. The geometry did not belong to the mountain. It belonged to my line of sight. I stopped walking. The formation stabilized. I shifted right. It corrected. I took 2 steps left. It recalibrated. The movement was small, almost imperceptible, but precise. The alignment was no longer fixed to terrain. It was fixed to me. The air tightened around my chest. Not pain, constriction, the sensation of descending too quickly without moving at all. I heard something behind me. No footstep, no breath, just displacement. Snow compressing without visible cause. I did not turn immediately. I kept my eyes on the arc above the ridge. The lower edge seemed closer now, flattening slightly along its curve. My shadow shifted even though the moon had not. Something interrupted the light without crossing it. When I turned, the tree line was intact. No figure in open snow. No movement between trunks. But the darkness between the trees felt layered again, thicker than depth should allow. I took a step backward. The snow gave way unexpectedly, and I fell to one knee. The air beside my right ear moved. Close. Close enough that I felt a change in pressure against my skin. Not wind, not temperature. Presence. I froze where I had fallen, listening for breath that never came. I forced myself upright and moved toward the truck without running. The arc held position until I reached the door. The moment my hand touched the handle, the lights extinguished. Not fade, not drift. Absence. I drove down the mountain with the sensation that the alignment had not ended, only shifted. And something had just stepped out of the trees. Chapter 5: The Road. I did not stop driving until the ridge disappeared behind the curve of the valley. My hands remained steady on the wheel, but my breathing refused to settle. The forest pressed close to the road, branches leaning inward as if narrowing the path. The sky above was clear, no lights, no arc, only cold stars. Halfway down the service road, I pulled over. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed proof that what happened on the ridge had not followed me. I stepped out and opened the rear hatch, retrieving the portable camera I had mounted near the tree line earlier that night. Inside the truck, I replayed the final minutes of footage. The arc was visible, my fall, the darkness between the trees. I slowed the frame rate and watched again. For several seconds, nothing unusual appeared. Then I saw it. Between 2 trunks, where the snow should have been uniformly dark, there was distortion. Not shadow, not reflection. A vertical absence in the image, shaped by pressure rather than form. It occupied space without edges. The snow behind it compressed slightly inward, as if displaced by weight. The distortion moved once, not forward, not backward. Sideways with impossible smoothness. It did not step. It translated. Then the frame corrected itself, as though the air had relaxed back into position. I closed the footage and sat in silence. I did not need to review it again. Whatever stood at the tree line had not been imagination. It had been there long enough to be recorded and close enough to alter the air around it. I resumed driving. The road narrowed as it descended toward the main highway. Snow drifted lightly across the asphalt in thin sheets. My headlights caught movement ahead. A figure stood in the center of the lane, motionless. I slowed immediately. The person did not react to the glare. She wore a thin jacket unsuited for the temperature, hair loose against the windless dark. She did not wave. She did not shield her eyes. She simply stood there, facing my truck, as if she had been waiting. I stepped out cautiously. She looked disoriented but not injured. Her eyes were fixed somewhere beyond me, beyond the trees. When I asked her name, she answered without hesitation.
My name is Sarah.
The sound of it settled into my memory like something already known. She did not know where she was. She did not know how she arrived. She only remembered a light and the moment the hum stopped. I looked back toward the mountains. The sky was empty. The forest was still. And for the first time, the pattern made sense. They didn't take her. They moved her. I brought her into town just before midnight. The clinic lights were still on, though no one questioned her presence beyond the obvious shock of exposure and confusion. She repeated the same fragments, the hum, the light, the silence, no memory of travel, no recollection of distance. I did not tell anyone what I had seen on the ridge. I did not show them the footage. Some things are recorded for evidence, others are recorded for survival. After I left her in a warmed room under observation, I returned to my truck. The highway was empty, wind skimming thin layers of snow across the pavement. I turned once more toward the mountains before driving home. The sky remained clean and starless in its cold clarity. No arc, no distortion, no visible sign that anything had occurred beyond what I now carried in memory. When I stepped inside my house, I found frost on the interior of the window glass facing east. Not condensation, pattern. 4 faint impressions pressed into the ice from the outside, evenly spaced, forming the same shallow curve I had watched above the ridge. They were not there when I left. They were not random. I did not touch the glass. I understood then that the alignment had not ended on the mountain. It had followed me home.
Thank you for watching until the end. Your presence is important to us. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This way, YouTube understands that you want to keep listening to what comes next.